Okay, have you ever looked at, say, the perfect spiral of a galaxy and wondered if it shares some fundamental design with our own consciousness? Well, today we are diving into a really ambitious framework, Crippin's theory of universal balance. It's this idea that claims the very same math that structures the cosmos also dictates the rhythm of our own awareness, everything from physics and geometry right down to empathy itself.
This single line right here, this is the central mystery we're going to be exploring. It really sets the stage for a theory that's just as much philosophy as it is math. So what on earth could the geometry of empathy possibly mean? Let's find out.
We all talk about finding balance in our lives, right? But the theory we're digging into today asks a much more radical question. What if balance isn't just a feeling? What if it's a measurable, fundamental force of the universe? And that is the core, kind of audacious claim of Crippin's theory. It suggests that balance, or what the theory calls coherence, isn't just some subjective state we're all trying to achieve. Nope, it's a universal, measurable constant, an invisible architecture that connects everything from the spin at an atom to the design of a city.
Now this is a really crucial distinction. The theory argues that balance isn't static, like a perfectly still object. It's an active, dynamic rhythm, a constant dance of exchange that the source material calls reciprocity. It's this continuous adjustment that allows any system, whether it's an atom or a city, to coexist and thrive.
So, if balance is a measurable constant, how do you actually measure it? Well, this brings us to the mathematical heart of the theory. And don't worry, we're going to make this feel really intuitive.
All right, here it is, the Atlas T equation. This is the theory's attempt to basically give harmony a number. So T stands for the constant of balance, and it's calculated by multiplying three key variables: P for proportion, the Greek letter kappa for phase, and R for resonance.
So let's unpack this with a great analogy from the source material, running a marathon. First up, we've got P for proportion. This is your body's optimal design, the ideal length of your stride, the perfect geometric ratio of your movement. Think of it like the underlying blueprint, a structure the theory says is often linked to universal patterns, like the golden ratio. Okay, next, you add movement with kappa for phase. So if proportion is the perfect design of your stride, phase is the perfect pacing, the timing, the rhythm. It's that calibrated movement that keeps you from burning out. And this just reinforces that key idea. Balance isn't some static destination. It's something you achieve through constant adjustment. And what sustains it all? Well, that's R for resonance. If proportion is the perfect stride and phase is the perfect pace, resonance is the stable energy that emerges from that. It's what stops your whole system from either collapsing or just flying out of control. It's that sustained coherence you get from combining the best design with the perfect rhythm.
So how does this perfect balance, this T state, actually happen? The theory proposes it's a sweet spot between two conceptual forces. Think of it like this. You've got an outward expressive force, what the theory calls the reality field, and you've got an inward containing force, which it metaphorically calls the black matter field. And no, this isn't literal dark matter. It's just a name for a universal principle of containment. Any expression needs a container, right? Any outward force needs an inward boundary. The T state is that perfect dynamic balance right in the middle.
So if this equation applies to the entire cosmos, the theory's next logical step is to apply it to our own inner universe, the human mind. And this is where we get into the geometry of consciousness itself.
Okay, so this is where the theory introduces four geometric primitives that it claims are the fundamental language of our cognition. First, you have the triangle, linked to fire, which represents clarity and direction, our focused attention. Then there's the circle, linked to water, which is all about connection and continuity, our emotional self-regulation. The square, or earth, embodies stability and structure, our ability to set boundaries and feel grounded. And finally, the spiral, or air, stands for growth and integration. Learning from the past and adapting.
So what's the whole point of understanding this inner geometry? Well, the theory suggests it helps us cut down on the noise between our brain's two main networks. You've got the default mode network, that's your wandering, daydreaming mind, and then you have the task-positive network, which is your focused mind that's engaged with the world. True emotional coherence, that T state of balance, happens when these two networks finally learn to work together in harmony.
So, from the micro scale of the mind, the theory zooms right back out to the macro scale of our built environment. It proposes that this exact same equation can be used to create what it calls listening architecture. And this is where the theory becomes beautifully tangible. It links three iconic ancient structures directly to the equation. The pyramid, with its clear, focused climb to a single point, is the physical embodiment of proportion. The ziggurat, with its terraced, rhythmic steps, embodies phase. And the dome, with its perfect echoing acoustics, is the very picture of resonance. How cool is that? This line of thinking leads to a fascinating blueprint for what the theory calls a living ratio city. Just imagine cities with architecture based on the golden ratio, circular transit loops that promote flow instead of rigid grids, and green spaces that expand in natural, fractal patterns. It's a vision for building with the environment, not just plopping things down on top of it.
And now we get to the final section, which makes the most unexpected and maybe the most powerful connection in the whole theory.
All right, get ready, because this is where the theory makes its most mind-bending leap. On the left, you see something called a Smith chart. It's a super complex tool used by radio engineers for basically one reason: to get perfect resonance for radio waves, to manage energy flow and minimize any waste. In other words, it's a calculator for achieving the perfect balance of proportion, phase, and resonance, but for electrical systems.
And that right there is the crucial leap. The theory argues that the math used to get stable energy in an antenna is directly analogous to the geometry needed to stabilize empathy in a person. The medium is totally different, radio waves versus human consciousness, but that fundamental math of balance, that stabilizing geometry, is claimed to be the exact same.
And if you need one final striking image to hang on to, it's this. The theory actually refers to the human heart as the 13th node in a planetary grid of energy. It suggests that our heart acts as the ultimate tuning mechanism for each of us, and that its electromagnetic field emits a wave that mirrors the golden ratio, literally tuning us into the larger system.
So, we're left with a final, really personal question. If the universe truly operates on this rhythm of proportion, phase, and resonance, what geometric pattern defines the most resonant rhythm in your life? According to this theory, that pattern is absolutely worth looking for.